The Philadelphia Eagles need to make 3 key additions to the roster this offseason, and they're all going to come from the offensive side of the football.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use our code LOCKEDONNFL in all capital letters to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. The Eagles offseason, the theme regarding the next couple months is going to be all about in-house decisions, in my opinion. The biggest moves they need to decide on come from their own roster. What are we going to do with A.J. Brown? Are they going to try to make this work for another year, run it back in 2026, or are they going to trade him? Is Lane Johnson going to retire? Is Howie Roseman going to attempt to try to re-sign Dallas Goedert after a career year where he had 11 receiving touchdowns in the regular season, 2 in the playoffs, 13 total? Jahan Dotson, is that somebody that they actually want to re-sign and make a part of this future on offense as a young player, especially with A.J. Brown's future up in the air? Is Dotson a foregone conclusion that he's out of the building this offseason, right? I think Landon Dickerson and Tyler Steen, Cam Jurgens, that interior of the offensive line, are those the staples that you want to move forward with towards the future? So I think, again, this offseason, a lot of the main moves Howie Roseman needs to make is about long-term, who are we keeping on this offense and who are we moving on from? On defense, it's which guys are we giving massive extensions to now? Who are we going to hold off on for another year? Are there guys in unrestricted free agency like Jalen Phillips and Nakobe Dean that we want to try to keep? Reed Blankenship. It's mostly housekeeping, in-house items to deal with this offseason. But I will say there are 3 key things I think the Eagles need to add to the roster from outside of the organization this offseason. And I don't mean bringing in another offensive coordinator, a new play caller to replace Kevin Patullo. Obviously, that's #1 on the list, and the Eagles are in the thick of it right now, interviewing candidates to be Jalen Hurts' new play caller. I'm talking about players, personnel, roster decisions that Howie Roseman needs to make. There's 3 key additions that he's got to bring in players from outside of the organization to help out in 2026. And the #1 need that they have on this roster, both short-term and long-term, I already kind of mentioned it, they need an heir apparent to Lane Johnson. Look, Lane Johnson this past season, before he got injured, was still the best one-on-one right tackle in football that did not need help. He didn't need chip blocks from a running back or a tight end. When you put him on an island, the advanced stats show he was still the best right tackle and maybe the best tackle in all of football. But Lane Johnson has said multiple times in the past that he has considered retirement before, already in his career, that he wasn't someone that plans to play into his 40s like Jason Peters, that maybe even if they won the Super Bowl again in 2025, he would go out on top. He's 36 years old, now coming off an injury. If there's a lot of change to this offense this year, maybe Lane decides to hang it up now. But even if he doesn't, and I don't project he will retire this year, I don't think he's going to want to go out like that where he was not able to come back from that Liz Frank injury. I do think Lane sees that he's still at the height of his powers, that he could play another year or two at a really high level. But even if that is the case, even if Lane does not retire this year, we're watching it now. Like, now it's a matter of when, not if, Lane Johnson will retire within the next 3 years tops. I cannot see him playing another 3 seasons. I think you get another year or 2 out of number 65. And in the past, I did not like the idea of drafting, unless he started at right guard for a couple years, right? Like Cam Jurgens did in 2023. I didn't like, unless he was a inside-out player that could play both guard and tackle, I did not like the idea of drafting Lane Johnson's heir apparent years before Lane considered retiring. Like, if you almost got through an entire rookie contract of a first-round offensive lineman or a second-round pick, that sat on the bench for half of that rookie deal, if not more. I don't like the use of that asset on that position in that situation. I thought Andre Dillard in 2019, unless you knew Jason Peters was going to be done in a year or two, and I think they did at that time, but that move, I was skeptical because I didn't know if JP was going to hang it up yet. And I still thought in 2018, actually, that was before the 2019 season, Jason Peters was still playing at a pretty high level coming back from that 2017 injury that he suffered. Now, we know a couple years later that, they did need to replace Jason Peters. It wasn't Andre Dillard who did it. It was Jordan Mailata, but that move actually did make sense. If they would have drafted Lane Johnson's heir apparent in 2023 or 2024, and we're heading into year 3 and this kid hasn't started yet, to me, that would be a problem. But now that we know it's going to be coming in a season or two, if not right now I am okay with, especially with the injuries, the older you get, they're going to start piling up, kind of like they did for Jason Peters. And I thought Fred Johnson played pretty well this year, but if Lane Johnson misses another 7 to 8 games in a season, I would like to know that they have a first or second round talent behind him waiting in the wings. So I think now is the time to strike. And I would like him to have inside-out versatility because my second thing they need to add is upgraded talent on the interior of the offensive line. Tyler Steen, I thought, was fine this year in his first season starting at right guard, but I think they could definitely upgrade that spot. And it would be nice to kind of kill two birds with one stone by drafting Proctor out of Alabama. If you could bring him in and let him just maul guys on the inside for a year or two until Lane Johnson does hang it up, and then you move him to right tackle. Not only does that upgrade the right guard position right now, but it also gives you that replacement to Lane Johnson long term. I really think when you look at Tyler Steen's performance this year, Landon Dickerson too, it's Landon Dickerson is an elite football player when he's healthy. And he has been a really good player for the Eagles in 2022, 3, 4, 5, so 4 straight seasons, right? Or 5 straight years. I thought he's been an elite player more times than he hasn't been. But in 2025, he showed, I think his body is starting to wear down already. I don't think this is going to be a guy that ages well, like a Lane Johnson or Jason Peters that plays at 35 years old or older. I mean, he suffered a lot of serious injuries in high school and college at Alabama, multiple leg injuries. He has suffered a ton of injuries in Philadelphia. It feels like this guy is always limping off the field. And again, an elite football player, an elite leader for your team in 2 Super Bowl runs, including a Super Bowl win last year where he was a legend playing center for Cam Jurgens in the NFC title, playing through that injury and then dominating in the Super Bowl. But I think not only are you looking to upgrade Tyler Steen at right guard, but you might need in a year or two a replacement at left guard for Landon Dickerson. The numbers back it up that the interior of this line, and again, there were a lot of injuries to Dickerson and Jurgens, but they just weren't good either. Even when I thought they were getting healthier, they weren't very efficient. I saw this on X. Most pressures allowed among all guards this year. Tyler Steen was 4th with 37 allowed. Landon Dickerson was 11th with 33 pressures allowed. PFF's run blocking grades. Tyler Steen, 73 even, 22nd in the league. Landon Dickerson, 67.8. That's 39th. So I hope in the draft, and whether it's one of these guys from Alabama or the Penn State prospect, just bring in somebody to me that can present an upgrade on the interior, and then also could be for Tyler Steen this year. Steen also, by the way, is in his last year of his rookie deal, and I can't imagine they re-sign him. Bring in somebody to replace, I think, an upgrade Steen right now, and then maybe be the long-term replacement to Lane Johnson or Landon Dickerson. I don't think all 3 of those guys are going to be gone in a year or two, Steen, Dickerson, and Lane, but there's a scenario where a couple of them are, maybe all 3 are. And then Cam Jurgens at center is coming off a really bad year. I think a couple of those guys will bounce back with a year of health. I think Landon Dickerson, if he does get healthy this year, will be elite in 2026 again. I do think Cam Jurgens can bounce back, and Tyler Steen is okay. But there's question marks about 4, including Lane Johnson, 4 of 5 starting offensive linemen. And even Jordan Mailata has talked about maybe retiring early. So this is the year for me, if I'm Howie Roseman, to start bringing in some more offensive line talent. And I like that they drafted a bunch of guys in day 3 last year. Williams, Hinton. They brought in Drew Kendall as well at center, who I really like. But this year, I want to see them do it in the form of a first or second round pick. They haven't drafted a lineman in the first 2 rounds since Cam Jurgens in 2022. I think now is the right. I like that they took some time to invest in other positions. You guys know me. I wanted that for years. Now I think we go back to the trenches this offseason. And then my last thing, back to the line, a 2-way player at tight end to replace Dallas Goedert. Not just somebody that can be the run after the catch weapon that Goddard is, the deep threat, the strong hand, tough player over the middle, clutch on third down in big games in the playoffs. But they need someone that can block. In my simulation the other day, I had them sign Isaiah Likely to a 1-year deal, and I like Likely's receiving ability, but they do need a blocker, not just to replace Goddard, but to replace Grant Calcaterra and pretty much every tight end they had on the roster last year. They were so bad running the football in 12 and 13 personnel because of those tight ends mostly. And for me, it's like, when Lane Johnson comes back, you can use a bonus 6th offensive lineman at times to replace what the tight ends could not do last year to make up for that. But for me, especially with Goddard gone, I think you need a complete 2-way tight end, whether it is through free agency or through the draft, to replace Dallas. So those are my big things they need to add to this roster from outside the organization. Lane Johnson's heir apparent. I think you need interior offensive line upgrades and then a 2-way tight end to replace Dallas Goedert and to upgrade the miserable depth you had behind him. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. It's interesting. This offense, they might run it back in 2026, but there is a scenario where this offense might be completely different, and it could lead to a rebuild in 2027. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivative LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is also brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is in full swing. The conference championships are this Sunday. There's nothing like being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, and cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pulled up Game Time the other day to check out some games, found great ticket options almost instantly, and what I love is you can view what you're going to get with the view of your seat before buying, so there's absolutely no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today and get back to being there live. Thanks for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day in the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure you subscribe to our Everydayer Club, our all-access pass, or that's $15 a month, $5 a month as well, gets you ad-free shows, a membership to our Discord channel where all the Locked On hosts are talking football, Eagles fans as well. $15 a month gets you exclusive episodes of Locked On Eagles, one-on-one texting with myself, discounts on our merch store, a newsletter after every episode. So if you're interested, head over to LockedOnPodcast.com/everydayer or lockedoneagles.supercast.com. So for me, if I'm Howie Roseman this offseason, I'm doing whatever I can to try to run it back personnel-wise. I think the biggest problem with the Eagles this past year on offense, it was definitely play calling and coaching with Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo. And yes, Jalen Hurts did not have a great year. The offensive line was not good. A lot of that was because of injuries, but performance-wise, they just were a lot worse than they've been in years past. Even Jordan Mailata was a lot more inconsistent this year. Jurgens and Dickerson were dealing with things all year long and just were not healthy, were not consistently good. Tyler Steen was definitely a downgrade from Mekhi Becton, and Lane Johnson was banged up, so you had a massive downgrade at right tackle. So there were things on the field personnel-wise that were problems, but to me, the biggest issue was about coaching with this offense. So if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm not trying to blow it up. Like, yes, there's going to be change. I don't think Dallas Goedert will be back. I don't think Jahan Dotson will be back. A.J. Brown, it's up to him. If he wants to be traded, I think they will move him. But if I am Howie, I'm trying to do whatever I can to make it work with A.J. I'm trying to get Lane Johnson back at least for one more year. I don't want to completely rebuild the identity of this offense. There needs to be change. Like, change is going to happen no matter what, because of the free agency and the reality of, the defensive players you got to pay. And you need to switch things up schematically to improve this offense and to evolve it. But I want A.J. Brown back. I want Lane Johnson back. Heck, I would love to have Dallas Goedert back. I don't think that's realistic, but I think you should tweak things. You should retool, but I don't want a complete rebuild. That would be my approach to the offense this year. Let's get a new coordinator with new, fresh ideas, somebody that can evolve Jalen Hurts' game, that can get him back to being the elite running quarterback that he was before 2025. Get somebody that can actually have creative ways to get A.J. Brown the ball, to get him to buy back in. Like, that is my approach. But I will say, I was thinking about this yesterday. There is a scenario, and you could call it the nightmare scenario, but there is a situation that could play out that really forces the Eagles offense to look completely different, and maybe it does start a rebuild after 2026. I think it could go one of two ways if this scenario plays out. Like, let's say A.J. Brown's traded. Let's say Dallas Goedert walks in free agency. Jahan Dotson's gone. Let's say Lane Johnson does retire. And then, Brian Daboll's off the board for the offensive coordinator position. So is Mike McDaniel. Let's say they're not interested in Cliff Kingsbury. They don't go with one of these young guys like a Charlie Weiss Jr. Zach Robinson's off the board now as well. He is the new Tampa Bay offensive coordinator. Let's say they bring in somebody underwhelming like a Matt Nagy, who I saw they're set to interview, was reported yesterday. Hate that idea. There is a scenario that plays out where it's like, okay, 2026 is do or die. We lost a lot of pieces. We kind of have to reinvent ourselves on the fly. And I do think, I was talking about this yesterday, how much pressure that would be placed on the shoulders of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts to carry you in 2026 more than you did in 2025. That scenario could play out really well for the Birds, or it could lead to a rebuild. It could lead to good things. Like I said, if Nick and Jalen show that they can carry this team more, that answer is a long-term question about your head coach and your quarterback. I could see them benefiting from not feeling the pressure of keeping A.J. Brown healthy and happy, feeling the need to force-feed him the football, building the passing attack around Devontae Smith and some younger, more bought-in players. I could see them not worrying about being a run-first team with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and kind of just leaning into that identity. And again, not being concerned a wide receiver is going to start all this drama. I could see that being something that actually helps out the Eagles in a positive, the way it helped the Bills in 2024. Now, eventually, again, you got to have those alphas like AJ, even if they are a distraction in the room because of their talent. It caught up to the Bills in 2025, but I could see it actually benefiting the Eagles next year like it benefited the Bills in 2024. So that's the positive way that scenario could play out. But again, if you lose A.J. Brown, if you lose Lane Johnson and Dallas Goedert and Jahan Dotson and you don't get the coordinator, you're a top 3 choice that you wanted, and Nick Sirianni has his hands on this offense again, and it looks kind of the same as it always has, I could see this team hit a little bit of a rebuild after 2026, at least on that side of the football, where they do reconsider the future of everybody on that side of the ball. So again, I don't predict that's what's going to play out. I don't think all of those guys are gone in 2026. I would like to believe Lane Johnson's back. I would like to believe that they can make this work with A.J. Brown. I really hope they bring in somebody like a Shielhaas or a Weiss Jr. Kingsbury is still out there. Joe Brady, if Brian Dable comes in and is the Buffalo Bills head coach, I think Joe Brady will be on the move. Bring him in as the offensive coordinator. I think, again, there could be a middle ground between just losing everybody and then just completely running it back from what you had in 2025. I think the reality lies somewhere in the middle. But I was thinking last night, just preparing, because this is the first year in a long time, since 2022, I would say, where from a personnel perspective, this Eagles offense could see a lot of change, maybe even more than you expect. So I'm just trying to prepare for that scenario and then think about if that does happen, could that lead to a better season in 2026 or could it lead to a rebuild? I think it could go really one of those two ways, and I'm not sure if there's much of a middle ground because I don't think Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman are going to accept another up and down offensive season from Nick Sirianni and maybe Jalen Hurts as well. So just prepare for that. I'm not predicting that's what happens, but I think this offense, I hope that they run it back in a way personnel-wise this year, but we could see a very different looking unit this year and maybe in 2027 if certain things go a certain way this offseason, especially around the OC position, A.J. Brown, Lane Johnson, and Dallas Goedert. That's a lot of guys that have been a big part of this unit for years that could be gone. And the OC spot, we know how crucial that's been to the Eagles' success in 2022 and 2024 and how detrimental that position's been to the Eagles' downfall in 2023 and in 2025. So we'll see what happens. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, I have some questions surrounding second-year players like Jihad Campbell and Drew Makuba we'll get into next. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, Kevin Patullo, you know how important it is to get it right. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed somebody that I needed to hire for Locked On Eagles, I would go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps you stand out and reach quality candidates faster. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard of Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Guys, today's show is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish without the stress of guesswork. My taxes are pretty complicated with a couple full-time jobs, independent contracting, podcasting. It's complex, so I have TurboTax take care of everything. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out all these forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms, as I was mentioning, and it works to get you every deduction. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Most of the questions I've been posing about this offseason, as you guys can tell, the theme has been offense. What's A.J. Brown going to do? Does he want to be in Philly long term? Is Lane Johnson going to retire? Dallas Goedert was this past season his last year in Philadelphia. Who's the OC? What's the future of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts? It's mostly 99% of the topics have been about the offensive side of the football. I think on defense, it's mostly just who are you paying and when? Like, when does Jalen Carter get his extension? Jordan Davis. Of the three edge rushers, Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, and Jalen Phillips, which of the two of those three do you decide to pay? Because I don't think they're going to pay all three. Which two do you prioritize long term? Jalen needs a deal right now, but Jalix and Nolan are going to need them in a year or two. So that's like one of the bigger questions on defense, but everything else is like, we know, I think Nakobe Dean's gone. We know that I think they're going to try to pay Reed Blankenship at the right price, but they're going to be very disciplined in what they're willing to spend there. Everything else on defense is like, yeah, you're running it back. This is a young core that Vic Fangio has made into an elite unit over these last 2 years. So there's not a lot of questions, but I will say when it comes to like linebacker, Nakobe Dean leaving, it does leave some questions about Jihad Campbell. Reed Blankenship, if he leaves, it would leave some questions about Drew Makuba and this rookie class from 2025. So if I had three main questions about last year's rookie class heading into year two of them obviously surround Campbell and Makuba. And then the other one to me is just like, who outside of those two could potentially work their way into a starting job from that class? Like, is it Cam Williams? Is it Miles Hinton? Is it Drew Kendall? Is it Smile Mondin at some point at linebacker? That's like one of the main questions is there anybody else from that class that doesn't look great after Campbell and Makuba that can become something? Ty Robinson did not have a great rookie year. Mac McWilliams at corner, like, is he somebody to keep an eye on, at least for like a good special teams player? Any practice squad guys? So that's a main question, but the big two, Campbell and Makuba, that's where the questions are surrounding. It's those two prospects, especially if they lose two starters at those positions. Blankenship and Dean, those guys were already starters in a lot of games in 2025, but the roles would be even bigger in year two. For Jihad Campbell, he was great this year. When he did play in place of Nakobe, he was as good as Dean, if not better in a lot of ways. He was one of the best coverage linebackers in football when he was out there. I thought his tackling was great. His ability to get sideline to sideline, to work through the mud against the run, forcing turnovers like in big spots early on in the season. He had some key forced turnovers against the Cowboys, a forced fumble against the Chiefs and Buccaneers, like a huge interception in the red zone against Baker Mayfield that I think won you that game. Jihad was great in a lot of ways. The main question, especially if Nakobe's gone, is if Campbell can develop more as a blitzer in year two. If he can become that hybrid Swiss Army knife from hell that we all said he could be coming out of Alabama, a Micah Parsons type of player, like that we envisioned his like ultimate ceiling could be, because he is a former edge rusher. He's a former pass rusher. If he could become the blitzer that Nakobe Dean was, I'm not saying he needs to become Micah Parsons, but if he could become the blitzer that Nakobe is, then he's going to be one of the best linebackers in football. He's going to be an absolute star. I'm already pretty certain after seeing what I saw on tape last year, Jihad's going to fill in for Nakobe right away, and we're not going to miss Dean at all. But that's the one department that you could miss Nakobe, is blitzing. Because Nakobe was, I think when he came back, Dean was the best blitzing linebacker in football. Jihad, I thought he needed some work as a blitzer. He's explosive, he's lengthy. Again, he's a former edge rusher for a reason, but I want to see him just move through people, push bodies down like Nakobe did. And I think he needs to get a little bit stronger in his base. I want to see him put on some muscle, especially in his upper body, to win those one-on-one battles. Some improved pass rushing moves, because even when they tried to use him on the edge a little bit, when Nakobe Dean came back and they had yet to get Nolan Smith back from IR or Brandon Graham from retirement or Jalen Phillips at the trade deadline, Jihad played on the edge, and I don't think he made much of an impact at all right there. So for me, it's like Campbell already is a much better coverage linebacker than I thought. He's elite in that area. He's great against the run, turnovers. He's a playmaker. He's a great tackler. My big question for Jihad heading into year 2 is, can he become the blitzer Nakobe Dean was? Because if he can, he is one of the best linebackers in football. And then for me, for Drew Makuba, the other standout rookie from 2025, the big question is his health long term. Is this going to be a guy that's in and out of the lineup? That's been a concern about Makuba. I think that's why his stock was a little bit lower coming out of Texas last year as a late second-round pick. He had ball skills. I mean, the interceptions were there, the coverage ability, the vision, the versatility, playing slot, playing deep safety. I think his tackling for a guy of his frame is pretty strong as well. He's a playmaker in big moments, but I think people were concerned if he could hold up in the NFL. And what happened the second half of the year, Makuba got hurt with a season-ending injury. If Reed Blankenship's gone, Makuba is your top safety next year heading into year 2. They're going to need to rely on him, especially with Sidney Brown becoming a bust and Marcus Epps is a free agent. Obviously, they would add more safeties in the draft or free agency if they don't retain Reed. But the big question for Makuba is going to be, can this guy stay healthy? Because even if Blankenship is back next year, the Eagles need Makuba. Marcus Epps was fine. I thought he did actually really solid in, an emergency in replacement of Makuba, but he was nowhere near the playmaker Makuba was from an interception perspective with coverage. I think Makuba needs to be on the field. These safeties in a Vic Fangio defense are very important. So those are my main questions for the second-year players. Jihad Campbell, can he grow as a blitzer? Drew Makuba, can he stay healthy? And then outside of those two, can anybody be anything from that class? That's going to be what I'm looking for heading into this offseason. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.